first, each of you let us know how you came to the project, I think. You, I know, are misadventurous. I mean, you love projects that are challenging in all ways, at least what I know of you as a filmmaker. But this one, I mean, apart from the fact that Felicity is just a rock star, how did you, Holly, first get involved in this?
Well, I first heard about the project in 2016 when Felicity put out a global call for applications for the team. And I have been working in media, film.
So did she do it online? I mean,
Did it online, really, mostly online, yeah. And I mean, my dirty little secret is I actually applied for the expedition and got rejected. But like any good documentarian, kick my foot in the door over and over again. And so then, but also it's a world I had been working in media in terms of women in international politics and the outdoors and environment. And so those are things that were near and dear to my professional heart and personal heart. And so I just felt the film had to be made about it. And these guys both came in early on the project in different ways. Jill, you can speak for yourself. Actually, you probably don't know this, Jeremy, but Blumhouse came on board because of Jill in a way. So I'll let you tell that story. It's a weird story.
That was something crazy. I had worked on Babushkas of Chernobyl, a great movie that Holly did. Really great movie. And she called me one day and said, I want to go film this possible movie. There are these women training in Iceland and you should come. And I was thinking, God, this seems like a great way to lose weight. And
there are easier ways.
You did say that.
I mean, I still kind
I'm
of
like, Jill,
would have
stay
done
focused.
it. Well, it's true. And then and she just really wanted a small amount of money to go shoot. She knew she needed the training if she was going to do the movie. And really it was Amber and I think, that said, yeah, we want to help you do this. And that was kind of the beginning.
So you heard a pitch at a film festival? Did I read that
Oh, okay.
someplace?
So then what happened? And really my whole stance was anything that Holly thought was going to be great because she's such a great filmmaker. And I think documentary filmmaking is so much about directors and people that you like that, that I wanted to support. I knew anything she was going to do was going to be good. But so then one day, how do I tell the story?
One day I didn't have any money and I made Jill a call
on this vacation that I don't want to talk about. And she was like, will you please go to Palm Springs? Because my mother had a house there and go to this thing. And we can, if you pitch it properly, we can get 5,000. It was some small amount of money. And I was just like, oh my God. So I left this vacation early. It was actually this horrible place, but it was the Amangiri. And I like drove from the Amangiri to a mall and got there, and there were the strangest people giving basically the worst pitches you've ever heard in your entire life, with like a panel of people with clipboards in front of them. And I gave up, and I thought I did a really good job. I don't think the people really liked it, but somebody, Amanda
Spain.
And
yeah.
this,
Mhm.
and actually she had a really good pitch. So she and I sort of were in the lobby and we were like, we have good movies. These people are like, so, and she said, I really like your movie and this isn't what I normally do. I work for Blumhouse and I think this could be great for us. And I was like what? I was like, I don't think we're going to get the $5,000, but I think Blumhouse seems interested. And she said, what? And that's what happened.
So Jeremy.
Yeah, I can pick it up from there.
Yeah.
First of all, can I just say, can we give it up again for our filmmaker? I mean, Holly, this movie is so, I have to admit to you, and my wife will tell you this is true, I've probably seen the movie 6 times. I cry every time. This movie makes me cry every time I watch it. I just have to say that to you. It's so good and so accomplished. But yeah, so Amanda Spain was a wonderful executive who worked for us no longer. She's somewhere else now, but she's now a buyer. She got smart and realized that's easier to buy films than to go make them. But she came in one Monday, I remember saying, okay, I have this crazy story and I was at this thing. But anyway, I found this great movie. I think it's so us. And I feel like at the time, maybe there was a sizzle, I think is what we saw, maybe 6 minutes or something. But but it was very obvious for us when we saw it that it was so right for Blumhouse. You may think like, how is that right for Blumhouse? And for those who don't know, the
It
company
was
was,
terrifying out.
it is terrifying. I mean, by the way, that great line, like, this is fucking terrifying. But for those who don't know, the company Blumhouse was founded really on the back of making lower budgeted thriller and horror movies, but it's expanded well beyond that now, and we do lots of different things. But listen, we always look for stories that are great narratives that also smuggle in or Trojan horse in social commentary, and this movie is filled with social commentary that you don't even know you're watching because you're just so stuck on these ladies. And you're watching these friendships form, and it's really about unexpected friendship. And I had this thought, which I'd never said to you, but you may hate it. But I remember the first time I watched the cut, I thought, oh my God, it's Diner, but it's for women. Because Barry Levinson's Diner was like the great movie that defined like male relationships. And this movie is a beautiful ode to female friendship. And I remember, anyway, but so yeah, it was a very obvious choice for us when we saw it. And thank you. I'm glad you and Amanda met. That was meant
It
to
was
be.
bizarre.
I'm just fascinated by this woman, Felicity, who is
Yeah.
really an incredible force, and I'm glad that she had the child and was able to do the expedition with you.
Delayed it a year. You don't know
delayed
that
it-
watching
you
that.
did?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, you can't tell
It,
everything. in
it
that.
happens.
What was your, did you know her before, or you met her when you did so you
Did
in
not-
response to the online thing?
Yes, no, didn't know her, she is, briefly mentioned in the film, she was the first woman to cross Antarctica solo. And I did read her book Alone, which is really good if anyone wants to read it. And also just to let you know, this team is actually putting out a book this fall about this experience.
Oh.
So that they all wrote together. Felicity was the lead, but yeah, so
That's
if you
lovely.
want to hear any more.
Who's the publisher?
I think it's HarperCollins, maybe, yeah.
So she chose the woman, and again, although, there's so much information in this film and so many characters that it's taken me about 3 viewings to actually sort people out,
Yeah.
and that's why I kept coming back to you and asking you questions. But in choosing the women, it's still not entirely clear to me how she made those choices. Do you have any insight into that?
Well, I think that she, I think probably many of us in this room could be trained physically to the point where you could do a trip like this. It would be hard, right? But I think that the grit and mental determination and willingness to set aside ego and things like that, those are all things that you look for in a personality. And I think she says at the beginning of the film, the last thing you want is 10 characters that are all the same. That's a recipe for disaster. And if any of you have done any expeditions, it's totally true, right? You have to all play a different role and all be appreciated in your role. That's another thing. Because if fingers start getting the rubber's going to hit the road at some point, and you have to sort of come together at that point. So I think she was looking for people. She interviewed them over Skype, and just tried to get a sense of their inner grit, really.
Yeah. So you never made it on location?
I never
actually?
did.
Okay.
I was scared.
But were you communicating with the crew while they
She
were?
would call me and say, it's not gonna happen. The helicopter crash, like crazy
Yeah.
thing. She was, and I knew it was gonna happen because she's so determined. But no, I never made it. I wanted to, but I was scared.
Could you communicate with them at all? Were you guys on Wi-Fi? Were you getting, were doing walk, or you were communicating with the helicopter, and that was?
In the high Arctic, yeah, no, we there was no, there was a sat phone for emergencies and for you. So you call into Borneo, the Russian ice station,
Right.
periodically, so they know, you haven't fallen off the edge. And, but for out there was no communication, but I distinctly remember calling Jill from a Icelandic glacier at one point with some crisis. But it was really great to have the team, the sort of larger production team there believing in the project, because there's a lot of industry people in this room. that the stakes were really high and there were all kinds of reasons it wasn't gonna, I appreciate Jill's words, but the truth is it was really likely this was never gonna pull off either the film or the expedition. And this team was counted out by the polar community and underestimated. And frankly, and when things were getting rough up there and during the 3-week delay, not terribly well supported. So, but they kept pulling together and marching ahead, and all of them, I think individually and collectively, when they were facing fears, whether, my fear was like, this is never, I'm never going to have this film. What am I going to tell all these guys? But also just that, anyway, so but they kept moving forward.
Were you in the black tent? Where was your tent, by the way? You were not one of the 3 tents. So they were the housing 4 per tent. Is that what?
Yeah. So generally our tent, the crew tent, was not in shot if we could help it. But I mean, they all look the same. So you'd never really know.
Right.
And it was one of the challenges of production that, it's 39 below. People are covered up all the time. And it's hard to make a documentary where you feel intimacy and who's talking. So there was a lot of work in I think from the rough cut, which when Jeremy started working on it till the end, of really trying to drill down on the characters and bring out the authentic moments. And I give Jeremy a lot of credit for it. He probably doesn't know this, but he saw the rough cut and he was like, yeah, your temp track is not, like it's expected or something.
Right.
You said something diplomatic, but it really made me, so that which led to what I think is a really great
I love the score.
original score by Alex Weston.
So beautiful.
You might know him.
I think I gave you, that's funny. I'm glad you remember that way. And not, it was so annoying. But I remember watching them for the rough cut, and I remember hearing in my head, I remember hearing the Friday Night Lights score and thinking like, we need a little Friday Night Lights vibe in there. And I think I sent you that, explosions in the sky as a sample, and just said something in this vein is what I'm hearing, but take it or leave it. That may be terrible. And there actually is a vibe. There's a lot of vibe in there that feels like that. But then the strings are awesome. I mean, the beautiful kind of strings happening in the third act are great. But I think you found it. You found the soundscape really beautifully. Yeah.
Thanks. Well, I appreciate your license to do that, because now I was like, Alex, rock and roll klezmer when they're on the helicopter. It's like, what?
Oh, yeah, we did talk about that. That's right. We did say rock and roll, because we started saying, what if there's music that's originated from the homes of all of our women in some way, and because you'd use one little piece when she was rock climbing. Yeah. Right. Yes, exactly. Yeah, funny.
Was it hard to fly the drones up there? I mean, do you get wind when you're up in the? Apart from the storm, which was very scary, and I don't know how you filmed that, but in the earlier sequences.
Yeah, the storm was in Iceland actually, and Eleanor and I were filming there with the team, and we actually got separated from the team in that was the worst storm there was, and we ended up having to do a lot of that was filmed by the women themselves in their tents, and then we had to go find them, and so it was a tricky scene. But what was I going to say before that? Oh, the drones. So we were quite lucky in the high north that we didn't have storms actually, and we didn't even have huge wind, because certainly we would never have gotten that drone footage. Right. Catherine, it was still very hard because she was up against what the Russian drone pilots were up against in terms of being so close to magnetic north, you can't control the drone, right? And so she did a pretty masterful job of, she didn't lose the drone and she got the footage. So success.
Do they ever get high winds up there?
Yeah.
They do.
Mm-hmm.
So you were really lucky.
We were lucky. Yeah.
Very scary. Very scary. Getting it out to the greater audience. I mean, we're very privileged right at the beginning of the life of the distribution of this picture, but you're invited to a lot of festivals. I know that. And you're a festival darling. And
never been called that before. But
well, I think I took that from you.
Did I say that? I don't.
Okay.
I'm sure I may have.
So how do you see the life of the film, getting it out there? How do you find your audience for this film? I'm looking at the.
You're looking at me?
faces.
Oh, you're looking at me. I think that's a great question. Listen, first of all, there's no one size fits all with the film to get it out to the doc, to get it out into the world. And obviously getting a lot of eyeballs on it at festivals is great. And the
Yeah.
goal is to get it as many eyeballs as possible, and we've gone through a process of that. And I think there's more to do. I mean, every time I watch this film, I think everyone needs to see this movie. So I think it's still yet to be seen exactly how we're going to find a much broader audience, because part of that's about timing and when we're going out with it. So I think we need to have a reassessment of that.
Yeah, we have a robust fall festival
Slate, yeah.
schedule, and we're gonna have international premieres at Jackson Wild and Wild Screen, some big European festivals. And then, yeah, we're also kind of working on a parallel track. It's really already getting picked up in schools and in communities, and which I'm really happy about. We have a representative here from Justice Outside, which is an organization, I don't know where she is right now. There she is, which works on equity and inclusion in the outdoors and getting,
that's
especially young people and women, but everybody outdoors. And so we're hoping to be doing a lot of screenings over the next year in concert with them. And yeah, so the film can be, I think when we have our great sale to a platform and all that, that will
Yes,
be
that'd very
terrific.
exciting.
But I also think it's really important to keep boots on the ground and getting the film out into communities that, if it's on a Netflix or an Amazon, people might not necessarily see it,
Right.
that you want to see it.
Yeah. Do we have any questions from the audience that we're happy to open it up at any time? Does anyone? Yes, back there. Can you kind of shout it? Yeah.
Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
First of all, this is incredible. Really enjoyed it. Super inspiring. I'm just curious. I know it said in the end that this could be the last team that achieves this.
There you go. You got a mic.
Thank you.
I heard it. Yes.
Any other expeditions out there? Did you see other people while you were on this trek, or was it just this team kind of on their own?
There were some other expeditions that year, but the film leaves you with the notion that this could be the last team ever, which is sort of poignant moment. And at the time we didn't know. And, but the truth is they are in fact the last team ever to reach the pole, which with every passing year seems to be sticking. It's obvious, it's grim news. It's because of the state of the sea ice and the geopolitical conflict up there. You're completely it's the only folks who are running the operations which you need to do this expedition are the Russians. And so that was scuttled this spring again for obvious reasons. And then the last couple of years as well, one because of the pandemic. And yeah, so for all kinds of reasons, not to mention the quickly disappearing sea ice, it looks like this will be a last. And so of course it's a first and a last. And I think which makes the footage, I hope it's a good story, but I also think it's an important historical document now, unfortunately.
To add to that, was there any inkling at the time where you thought this could be the last one? It's really important. I know it's important anyway, but at the time,
I didn't think it would really be the last. All these crazy things have happened. I thought, scientists give it another dozen years or something, right? Where there's enough sea ice that people could cross it safely or semi-safely. But so even without all these other things happening, the ice is not going to last more than another 10 or 15 years. The summer sea ice will be gone soon. So.
Did you get scared a lot?
Oh, all the time.
Yeah. Yes.
It was just tremendous and just congratulations, because I know how difficult it is to do this kind of work as a documentarian. I'm just curious, the sound sounded so authentic that it was actually happening as it happened. It wasn't like looping or anything. How did you have logs on everybody privately, or how did you accomplish that?
Yeah, thanks for recognizing that, because that was one of the biggest challenges. And we knew for 2 years going that, I didn't want it to be a narrated film. If you think about most all polar expedition films, I think in most extreme conditions, you sit people down afterwards and they narrate the film because of the difficulty of capturing that authentic video, but audio. And then, but Eleanor and I in particular really worked through the process on our trips to Iceland and Oman, figuring out a system where we could pull this off. What we did is we basically put individual recording devices on everybody all the time. So we came back from post-production and we couldn't change it because of the temperature, right? You couldn't change the
Right.
knobs, you couldn't change the batteries. So there were all kinds of funky things to work out. But and a lot of times out there, we didn't even know what was being said. I mean, I had no idea that Misbah was singing Frank Sinatra.
Oh my
So
God.
I got back to Brooklyn, months later. So,
So
but the good news is we captured it. The bad news is we had hundreds of hours of audio to go through. I mean, granted, 90% of it was panting or swearing, but like the other 10%, there were these wonderful gems, and they, I think, really lend the film the humor and the authenticity, and it's something that we talked about a lot early on, and like,
Yeah.
how do you make it something special and really capture what they experienced?
Well, there's an intimacy, and by the way, I saw there's a question back there. We'll get to in a second, but there's an intimacy. I think one of the magic tricks of the movie is that you forget the cameras are there. I mean, I keep forgetting that I feel like I'm with them. It's really incredible. And they seem to forget about the cameras, which is kind of amazing. I think probably because there was, they were worried about survival. So why would they think about cameras? It's like the least of their worries. But that's really incredible. Yeah, I think that's extraordinary. There was a question.
They
by the way,
took a
about-
lot of
there.
equipment with them. You took a lot of equipment with you.
Yeah,
It's all pretty light equipment,
we had to be as light as possible because we had to
of
pull it.
course, yeah.
But it's still a lot. I mean, what kept me up for months was the camera batteries, because I was just obviously we didn't have a generator and there was no going to charge your batteries. So I thought that would be our biggest problem. In the end, we had hundreds of pounds of camera batteries, and that was not our problem. We had tons of camera batteries. We came back with full batteries.
What was your problem?
Oh, we don't have time, but I mean, it was, there were a lot of challenges, but in the end, our cameras held up, our batteries held up, and our team held up, and that was.
And the film is good. Yeah, yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Hi. Hi, Holly. Incredible work. Thank you all for sharing this story. It's incredible. I think one thing that's so captivating is, to your point, that you kind of forget that the cameras are there. So I'm curious, what was your experience? You show the strife and the glory of these women and the journey. What was your biggest strife and what was your biggest glory when you got there?
Oh, so if you're making the film and responsible for it, it's like hard to sort of sink into those moments
Right.
that I think you feel from the women. So there was a lot of strife because of that. And because, I mean, I guess I will say one thing, I had fully expected the team not to make it, not because I didn't believe in them, but because I thought that there would be an open lead of water. There should have been such an open lead of water, they could never have crossed it. And I knew they were not going to swim, right? So I expected the last shot in the film to be like a drone shot of, coming over this team that's stuck with all this water and they couldn't make it to the North Pole. So I had been sort of imagining, this isn't really answering your question, but like everything turned out differently than I thought. And so the hardest moment for me personally was, and it was quite personal, was the moment when Mariam got frostbite. So I knew that we had to finish her story and somebody on the team had to go with her. And I also knew pretty immediately that it had to be me, because I could not do what Catherine and Ingeborg were capable of doing as shooters. But I was able to take a camera and follow Mariam and go back and finish her story. So I had to do that, which was the right thing to do for the film, but it was the hardest moment for me.
So how
and-
many days were you gone?
Well, I guess that was like somewhere midway in the trip.
Mhm.
Yeah. but then of course, the fact that they beat the odds and expectations and reach the North Pole, as cliched as it sounds, what is a great moment. And several of them were the first from their countries to do that. And I personally love the moment at the North Pole when they lose the North Pole.
Yes, so good.
Just the idea, the metaphor
Yeah.
of that your own true north and the anchoring around climate change. Like, I think it is a climate change movie, but I think it's very different. And hopefully what it does is it makes people feel agency and possibility around their ability to engage it, as opposed to just feeling devastated and inert. And I think that, you know, again, the metaphor of women, and if it does anything in the world of climate change, it's going to be around women's leadership, I think. And
women of color.
and women of color, women come from different countries coming together to overcome the odds and do something that nobody thought could be done is hopefully not hit too hard, but it's certainly a metaphor for what needs to happen around climate.
We have more questions down here. Let's see. Yeah. Give it to the gentleman with the hat. Austin. Yeah.
All right, so I mean, it was obviously captivating. I mean, amazing just to watch. That whole
Likes that on.
experience. My question is, I'm completely out of my realm here. I am not in the film or movie industry, but coming from the marketing side, you know, you said you want to have as many eyeballs to see this film as possible, if any, or not at all. How much of a role does social media platforms play in advertising something like this to get people to see that, if it doesn't have any role at all? You know, like I said, I'm out of my realm. This might be the dumbest question ever asked. So
Not dumb at all. I think that's a very good question. I think that once we land with a platform where everyone can go find the movie, and I think Holly's right that this is probably going to be a series of platforms where people can see it. But I think that's when you have something that social can drive to. I think that's where it really becomes helpful. And I think it is the kind of movie that would really be serviced by social media in a very big way. But I think you need to be able to communicate through the socials where to go to see it. And we don't quite have that yet. Yeah, that would be my answer. Do you agree with that? Yeah.
The lady with the hat.
Hi.
Hi.
What a beautiful film. I've been waiting to see it for a long time. Jill and Amber, I know, and Holly. Beautiful, really moving. So quick, 2 thoughts for you. One is a question. Are you going to do a version where it's in Arabic? Because I think that would be really interesting. And I just wonder if you've thought about that. That's my first question. Then I have another thought.
Shall I answer it?
If you want to.
Yes.
Yes, great. Cool.
Okay.
And my other thought is just, I was thinking about in the work I do, one of our scientific advisors is a woman named Dr. Arlene Blum. And she led the first all-women summit of Annapurna in 1978, I think, and wrote this incredible book. And there's an amazing documentary about it. And I'm just wondering, the way my brain starts working is I start thinking, who are the different audiences for this film? For me, it's clearly a film about climate change. It's also clearly a film about women and women on so many levels, you know, women's capability to do things and to lead things and to work together. But so I started thinking about Arlene and the explorers, but then I was also thinking about like the whole climate world, because Climate Week, which I'll be at in New York, is in 2 weeks. And I'm just wondering if you guys are going to show it anywhere during that time, because that would be a really good thing to do. It's between the 18th and the 24th of September.
I don't think we are doing anything as part of that week. We do have various screenings coming up, but mostly on the traditional festival circuit at this point. In terms of the other markets that I think are substantial and important, you know, we're kind of just getting there. We will premiere in the Middle East in the fall, and we will hopefully find our place in the climate media world. The Redford Center is one of our grantors and one of our producers on this project, and that's what they do. That is their wheelhouse completely. So we'll form alliances with them as we move out into distribution.
And by the way, time-wise, we probably have time for just 2 more questions.
Gentleman right there has a question.
Okay.
Gentleman in the black.
Hi, thank you for sharing the film with us. I just wanted to know for you, Ms. Morris, what's one thing from the journey that you learned that you'll take with you for the rest of your life? And also for the filmmakers, what's the one thing you learned through the process of making the film that you'll take with you to the next project, the next project, next project?
I learned to pee very quickly.
Really good answer.
I mean, I guess really it sounds a bit corny, but I was completely inspired by these women. The thing that we sometimes don't mention, they were like regular people, like regular people, right? They weren't even athletes, much less polar explorers. And they overcame so much to get there, resistance and physical training and all that. So when they actually made it, or even just got out on the ice, I mean, I just found it, even though I've been kind of in this world for a while and I'm a sort of a jaded person, I was just so moved by that and wanted to maintain that in the film and hopefully other people. And it was about what I think you can see in other people what you're capable of. And so young women who see it, especially, like whether your true north is to make it to the North Pole, or if it's to become a climate activist, or to become an accountant, whatever it is, I think that those deep messages to the film are the things that, I don't know, that inspired me, and hopefully will do something in the world.
What was the average age of the 11 women?
Well, they range from like 28 to 50. Yeah.
One more question. Jeremy, you get to pick.
Oh, I get to pick.
We're gonna have Judy.
Thank you. Holly, could you talk a little bit about your directorial process? You had 3 people on your crew, is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
And were you all operating cameras all at the same time? Was anybody off location scouting, so to speak? I mean, I think you had some incredible shots in there
Yeah.
that looked like, oh, somebody went out and found that. So how'd you do it?
Well, I think it was probably pretty atypical. Process is such a big word. It's such an organized word for what happened. But so basically Catherine Ingeborg did most of the shooting out there. I did some. And in terms of scouting, we really couldn't go too far, right? It's not safe. And so the team, while we kept sort of documentary distance, right? By the time we were at the North Pole, we were really in an independent group. We couldn't go too far from them. We learned in Iceland that we could lose each other. And it wasn't a fatal problem in Iceland, but it would have been a fatal problem for the film anyway in the North Pole. So we were all pretty close to the team. But Catherine Ingeborg, in terms of process, one would be pulling all the stuff and the other would be shooting, and they would be taking turns because they were both pretty physically demanding. They would be skiing backwards, shooting. The drone I already talked about. So, and then of course, a lot of the intimacy happened inside the tents, which of course, difficulties like the stoves make you crazy, right? Because they have to be on all the time. It's the difference between life and death, but the audio, just, so like, there was all kinds of things which never seemed, you just sort of address them as they come up. But because we were able to train with them in extreme conditions, we were able to anticipate a lot of them. And of course, like polar bears, right? And I was torn because on one hand, I'm like, I don't want to see a polar bear, they're very dangerous. On the other hand, I'm like, God, polar bear, you know,
Right.
so. So that was my process.
You, the polar bear.
Please order, Jill, call Hollywood and order some polar bear footage.
right.
Yeah.
Jill pulled off a lot and introduced me to a lot of great people, but polar bear, she could not. Never asked.
But you know, there were a lot of locations in this film. And one becomes sort of, fascinated with all the Nordic scenes, but you filmed in so many countries. I mean, it's a big shoot.
Yeah.
It's a big shoot. Well, I think that's it. And thank you so much to our crew. And thank you so much for coming.